Hello and welcome to another episode of Gender Stories. I know I'm always excited and thrilled about all my guests, but today I have an extra little nerdy piece of excitement because I get to talk about Shakespeare. And for those of you who don't know, I am a little bit of a Shakespeare nerd. 30 years ago, I even did the Shakespeare camp at Stratford upon Avon. So super excited. And I get to talk about this with Beks Roen. And they help trans aspect folks and allies who feel isolated and powerless to find chosen family through queer fantasy and Shakespeare. Beks runs Roguish Goblin Stories, an online queer art library where enbies and aspects are the main characters. Rowan's goals for RGS is to grow it into a streaming platform that supports multiple queer artists full time, freeing them to focus on the art they were born to share. And I'm so excited to explore more about this. And as ever, listeners, all the links are going to be in the episode description to find out more about this. And welcome back. Thank you so much for making the time to talk with me for Gender Stories.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited. And of course, Shakespeare. I'm even wearing a sword on my shirt today.
I noticed that. And I was like, I should have worn my little, like, I have a Shakespeare shirt with like the picture of a bear that's like, anyway, it's all good. Okay, so before we get into the super nerding out about Shakespeare and the listeners are like, what is even happening right now? Let's talk about what is it that you love about Shakespeare. Let's start from there, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah. Um, I really like my background is particularly in mostly like outdoor Shakespeare, sort of like the free Shakespeare in the park, which is my
Mm-hmm.
favorite kind of theater because you get to welcome people who like can't access theater otherwise, and so you get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like first time theater folks, which is like so fun because like they often have like there's a fun sort of like nerves that they're like, okay, what is this, what are the expectations, I don't know what to, but also like this person is making eye contact with me and asking me questions that I'm like, I only know half of the words because this is 400-year-old text, but I think I'm supposed to answer. So you get a lot of people who like and are more engaged with you sometimes, and there's just such a fun like community vibe to that outdoor like Shakespeare in the park. Some of my favorite stories, like getting to see some kids. We're performing in a parking lot, and this group of kids who's like trying to stay busy during the summer rolls up because we're swinging swords doing fight call, and they're like, "What?" and they came over and they're sitting on the hot blacktop, like there's no shade. We're literally just like out in the full sun, and this like retired guy who had never met them before dropped like over $100 on our like VIP seats,
Mm-hmm.
not for him but for these three kids that were sitting on the ground by themselves so that they could have a special experience, like their first time ever seeing theater. And it's like that kind of like community among strangers, like it's so fun.
It is the best. I love Shakespeare in the Park. As my oldest like was growing up, we lived near Patterson Park in Minneapolis, where they would often have theater in the park, including Shakespeare. And we spent so many beautiful afternoons, in community. And I think that is the joy of like bringing the theater outside of the theater space, right? And to the people and giving people sometimes that first experience. It's just so beautiful. So I really resonate with so much of what you said, and of course in Shakespeare, because it is Elizabethan theater, there's also a lot of kind of gender swapping, right, and gender play, I would say also, and it's been really wonderful to see how creative people have gotten over the last couple of decades, especially in kind of playing with that in a lot of different ways. And I know that when you contacted me, you said something about how acting and Shakespeare in a way helped you come into awareness of your own gender identity. So I would love to hear more about that and how that process was. What was the process like for you, and were there specific moments that really stand out in that journey for you?
Yeah, so I I like to say that I face planted my way into professional acting because I was going to be an engineer. That was high school me was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then I went to a fairly rural Midwest high school, and there happened to be a local Shakespeare festival that started performing like across the street from my school, and my family was like, "We're going." So like I started talking with them because I'm an extrovert and have no idea what a stranger is.
A stranger is just a friend you haven't met, right? Like,
Exactly. And so they sort of like encouraged me to audition, and I was like, I've never done an audition before. I'm curious. I'll just go to see what an audition is. And then I walked out with a gig and went, I guess I'm an actor now.
I love that.
And it was interesting because I was one of the youngest in that cast, being like one of the student actors, and so I was mostly playing like, gentleman two, citizen four, like non-gendered ensemble roles, which meant that like, at the time I didn't really consciously clock it, but like looking back, I'm like, all of the costumes that I were in were fairly androgynous or like slightly masculine presenting. Um, Combine that with like just some of the conversations we had at the actor housing, like that was my first time meeting people in the gender diverse community, and like they were so just generous with like and honest about like, what are you curious about, like let's talk.
Hmm.
And they ended up being some of the first people that I called when I was, COVID hit my first year of college, and then like started looking around the internet and started hearing more stories and going, oh boy, oh boy. I might some of these stories about being ace and aro and trans are hitting very close to home. Hey guy.
But that's great that you already had like a little crew of people that you could call and like talk to. I love that.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, that's been like 6+ years, 7 years or something like that. And like, we still keep in touch, and like, we check in about like, hey, how's life going? Any pronoun updates? Anything I can help with? Yeah. So then like, I went to undergrad and got some experience in some other like theater, and started training in stage combat, which flows really nicely with
Hmm.
Shakespeare.
Absolutely. There's plenty of stage combat in many plays. Yes.
Oh yeah, and that has been a huge. It actually has been a source of like gender euphoria for me because it tricked me into working out. And it was really cool to like say that I got to swing swords for work, and then
Yeah.
I started assisting with classes, and I started training to be a teacher, and getting to be there to like boost the confidence of some of my trans students who like I put a rapier in their hands, and I have never seen them stand so tall, eyes so bright, and I was like, yeah, hey there.
Look at your confidence with this
Look
fake
at
weapon
this.
in your hands. Yes.
Look at this. Yeah. And so then I think then so college really helped me play around with. I got to play more masculine roles and like kind of figure out like, okay, what are the roles that I want to play, and how does my gender as the actor like interact with that? And then I was an actor teacher at Great Lakes Theater out in Cleveland for a year. After that was right after college. One of my favorite things. Um, and I always had my pronoun pin on because I've got a shoulder injury. And so it was just a visual marker for my teaching partners
Hmm.
since we were rotating, just to be like, remember,
Be
this is
careful. Yeah.
don't pull
Yes.
on this arm, please. Um, as we're like 7 a.m. in an English class going, okay. And so I had my pronoun pin on very visibly, and multiple schools where I would have kids like pull me aside, and or me and the and other folks aside, and be like, hey, I just wanted to tell you that like, because I see you like out and getting to do what you love, I know I'm gonna be okay. And I still tear up because like
Of course.
that's the why under everything. Because like man, if I had had a trans like actor walk into my classroom in high school, things might have been a little easier. But I at least get to pay that forward.
Absolutely. I love that. I feel like there are 10 different tangents I want to go with you in this conversation, but let's follow this one first. And then I want to go back to kind of this kind of finding yourself through acting role. But I want to talk for a moment about that power of being that person that younger folks like say thank you for making me feel like this is possible, right? And I definitely have experienced, I've been on the receiving end of experiencing that, from kids and young adults sometimes too, as an older trans person. I remember somebody going, oh, I'd never met somebody who was like, at the time, more like genderqueer, gender fluid, before we used non-binary, more like 20 years ago when I was in my 30s, who was like above like 25, right? And literally I thought that I had to like pick a gender when I left college. And I was like, you do not have to pick a gender if that's not what you want. You get to just be yourself. And so I think that the power to be that person that people see and they're like, oh, maybe a life is possible and doing what I want is possible. What is that like for you to be that person for other people, especially as somebody who didn't have that, right? I mean, you had a little bit of that with your first acting crew, it sounds like, but for those kids to have that at a younger age, what does that feel like for you?
Oh my goodness, I cry. I am tearing up actually, like thinking about it again, just because it is part of why I stay outside of major theater hubs like your Chicago, New York, your LA, just because like no nothing wrong with if you
No.
you are
Hmm.
moving there or you live there, but having spent so much time performing in more rural areas across the Midwest and elsewhere, the impact just it feels so much deeper and louder because there's often less access to it.
Absolutely.
I people come up who are like, "You're the first out trans person I've ever seen." I am like, they're crying. I'm crying. It's such a beautiful gift to just be that vessel because I'm just like showing up and being like, "Hello,
Yeah.
this is." um, but it is, my being raised in a Christian household. My dad's a pastor, and so like um being part of that culture of like looking for the people who are pushed out to the sides and being like, no, you get to you get to be in here too, and you're loved and you're not alone, like that, you know it's so special, and it makes me laugh and cry all at the same time.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like, so, you were brought up in a Christian household, but it sounds like maybe a more inclusive Christian household than
Oh
some other
yeah.
folks might be. Okay, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes, I really lucked out with, and like beyond immediate family, like out to like cousins are supportive, and I got to take my grandma to see her first drag show, and it was mine, my mom's, and my grandma's first drag show for Trans Day Visibility a few years ago, and like it's I part of why I'm like doing what I do and starting to produce more and like gather my own groups is
Mhm.
because I know how rare, unfortunately, that like that welcoming family and that welcoming
Mhm.
the environment is. And I'm like, well, dang it, I'm going to pay it forward to as many people as I can.
That is so beautiful. And I love that you're doing that through like the power of stories, right? Because again, it's that kind of sometimes it's hard to be what you cannot imagine or to create what you cannot imagine. And, even in this moment, I think I'm really seeing a lot of fear of like, if we do away with this part of the system, then what is life going to look like, right? And I get it, it's very human to be afraid of uncertainty. And so I think the stories and imagination and art have such an important role to play in the realm of possibility, right? Like I think they help us like expand the sense of what is possible and what we can create and what we can co-create together. And so I love that that's what you focus in your work on. It's
Yeah, I think especially I just finished reading the book Great White Bard by Farah
mm,
Kareem Cooper, who is, I believe, head of education at the Globe.
no, don't
Um,
ask me. I'm like terrible with my memory. So
she works at the Globe, but the book is specifically about like the history of Shakespeare and race making and racism and how it's been used and reclaimed and pushed and pulled in all these different directions, and it's yeah it's like, well, tracking just how potent the world making of specifically live theater is. It's like, okay, we saw Shakespeare get co-opted for some, colonialism and
yeah,
imperialism, but that shows that, okay, we can build just as strong systems that are healthier using the same tools. We just got to know like how to shape things.
absolutely. And I love that. And I'm really curious about because Shakespeare can be claimed and used in so many different ways, like both in terms of the plays, but also the person, right? There are so many who was really Shakespeare. This Italians even have their own like Shakespeare was really Italian, which always makes me think of like I think it's My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the movie where it's like that Greek, that Greek. I was like, oh my God, Italians do the same thing, and so there's like a whole theory, and there was Shakespeare a woman, was Shakespeare this person, right? Was Shakespeare, what class was Shakespeare, especially in such a class structured and obsessed country like the UK, which definitely is. Having lived there for a good 15 years before moving to the so-called United States. And so Shakespeare, I think, can be manipulated in so many ways, both the person and the work. And so I'm curious about how you found your way through into your own gender identity and expression through the different characters. And maybe even if there are one or two characters or one or two plays that really stand out, that were like a moment for you. And maybe not, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. Ooh, okay. Characters coming to mind right off the top of my head. I know that, like, just as a baseline, I give off a lot of Puck energy from Midsummer. Like, I am a chaos goblin through and through.
Fair.
um, I'm thinking of, honestly, some, like, a lot of the roles that, like, I usually use for, like, auditions. I'm thinking of Aufidius from Coriolanus, Arthur from King John. And I'm also, like, really fascinated by the idea of Beatrice and Benedict from Much Ado being, especially
Mhm.
Beatrice being non-binary,
Absolutely.
because they have that speech about, oh God, that I were a man, and it's just hearing that speech as an AFAB transmasculine person hits a little different.
There's a lot in Shakespeare that I feel like I revisited once I came into my gender, and I was like, it does feel different. There is something, yes, there is
Yeah.
just so much gender in the place. Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I really like, I like pulling from the histories, and some of the, like, Coriolanus is definitely not one of, like, it's no Caesar or Hamlet, as far as
No.
popularity goes. Um but, like, I think some of those, like, less popular plays have some really fascinating characters, and, like, Aufidius is this, I interpret him as this freedom fighter who's
Hmm.
going up against literal Rome, like,
Yeah.
and even Coriolanus in that play, there's he has this really strong resistance to bearing showing his scars to the people, and, like, going in front of the crowd and exposing his physical body, which I'm like, eh, eh.
Right. There's
What's there?
so many layers there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's also fun because, like, especially with, like, Aufidius, he's this this general of this army, and so, like, me being this tiny little 5'2", you know I've gotten more than one like, huh? When
That's
I
what you're auditioning for? Like,
Yeah. And I'm like, hear me out. And it's one of those that like I think it comes up in the conversations about especially being a trans masculine actor that like I am a very small person, my voice is higher, so roles like Puck, it's like, we need someone who looks not quite fully human, let's pull the non-binary person. It's like, nah, 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 nah. Okay.
that is one choice. Absolutely. Yeah.
Love the role, but I won't use it as an audition piece because of that. um,
Understandable. Hmm.
and roles like Arthur, he's like 14, he's like a kid, and so I get mistaken for a middle schooler frequently, and so it's like, those roles are like, okay, they align pronouns
Hmm.
wise with totally cool. And the story is fascinating. But it is fun with roles like Aufidius and Macbeth, those two in particular, um, to be like, no, really, think about it, um, because it's you're okay. The story has now shifted potentially with how you cast the other actors and what kind of gender dynamics
Absolutely.
you're going to have. Macbeth has some very potent lines about gender. I dare do all
Hmm.
that may become a man, who dares do more is none. But positioning a trans person as that just absolutely powerful symbol, is something that I don't see often. I'm seeing it more. Um, but it still definitely gets enough surprise that I'm like, okay, cool. We're gonna continue to dig into this and be like, no, really think about trans people as the one who can be wielding a sword and shield and winning the day. Like,
Exactly. And I think it also opens up people to think about masculinity and femininity and gender in general in different ways, right? Why is it that we associate maybe this more like pact, like ethereal, fairy, like of this world, not of this world qualities to like this kind of perceived androgyny, let's call it, right? And why is it that we feel like Macbeth should look a certain way or Ophelia should look a certain way? Like, where are those ideas coming from? And so I love that kind of subversive quality because also I feel like a lot of Shakespeare work was subversive at the time. And, and really, when you think about, especially when I hear the critique often or the concern from some people that's like, well, so many more people, so many more young people are exploring their gender because of the internet. And I'm like, look, I was brought up in the 70s. There was no internet. And I still had gender feelings. And people before me still had gender feelings. And people have had expansive gender for the whole history of humanity. I always say to people, I was like, well, sure, medical science, whatever, even though I'm a healthcare provider. But really, like history, like gives us a really good idea that gender expansiveness has always existed. The gender hasn't really been binary from the beginning of the world, like some people would have us believe, right? And even just looking at Shakespeare's work, like how much gender is in those plays, both around gender identity, gender dynamics, expectations of gender, what happens when you don't live up to those expectations, the intersections of gender and class, and kind of, there's so much there. And I was like, that was no internet, people. That was just
right.
theater.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's just such a good counter argument for folks who are like, it's a contagion, because of the internet. And I'm like, it's really not. Like a lot of us have been thinking about and questioning certain expectations societally for a very long time, including
Yeah.
Shakespeare,
I
right? I mean,
mean,
at least it feels like it.
pronouns alone, I mean, gender neutral, using they them as a gender neutral pronoun in English dates back pre-Shakespeare to at least Chaucer.
All the way to
And
Chaucer, at least, yeah.
and we used to have two versions of the second person pronoun, so like
Exactly, exactly. So nothing new under the sun in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that you're kind of really challenging people to think about the plays in a different way. Because I think we can get so used to things. Oh, this is what Macbeth looks like. This is like what I expect, out of, King Lear or whatever, right? Whichever
Yeah.
character, or out of, all of the Beatrice or any of the characters,
Right.
right? Or Romeo, even like some of the most kind of popular, let's say Romeo and Juliet. I feel like everybody knows Romeo and Juliet, right? And I've seen some really amazing casting of various characters to do with gender and expanding our expectations around gender, which is really fun. Oh, so much to talk about. And I love also what you said about not wanting to necessarily focus on the big theater cities, on the coast or even in Chicago in the Midwest, but really staying in maybe where there's not as much representation or not as much presence, both of trans folks and also, sometimes not as much theater, although I feel like I'm very lucky in Minnesota. We have like gazillion artists, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Midwest is such a fun place with like theater because you have all these hidden gems of like
Hmm.
all these that you're like, what is this? Like what are five gorgeous 20s renovated theaters doing in Cleveland? I love the Cleveland theater scene, and like Northeast Ohio has some really cool stuff.
That's cool.
I've worked in Indianapolis. Actually, like the play that I did in Indy was called Gender Play. Will Wilhelm and Aaron
Oh,
Murray.
nice. Hmm.
Um, and I got to understudy it, and it was just non-binary Shakespeare and tarot and just cracked open like my again like just cracked open a little bit more of like what I thought was possible. And
Hmm.
my fellow crew members definitely caught me a couple times backstage scribbling furiously in my notebook, not because anything had like gone wrong and I was taking notes, but because I'm like listening to the play and went ideas.
Yeah. I love that. I love that kind of sparking of the imagination. So
Yes.
I talking about imagination stories, the importance of stories. I would love to ask you a little bit more about Roguish Goblin Stories because, first of all, I love the name. Would love to hear more about why you came up with that name, but also just the idea of having this online queer library, the streaming project you're doing. Just tell me everything. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so the name came from I got the nickname Chaos Goblin at my first stage combat workshop, not because of the gleeful cackling that ensued once I held a sword and was having a fair amount of fun, um, but because of the ice cream sundae that we had on the second day after training, and I get very hyper on sugar very quickly. Um, Thus the name Chaos Goblin. Unfortunately, that is already trademarked.
It sure is. Yes.
So I was like, well, okay, roguish goblin. I get that that term roguish a lot. Rogue is also the class that I usually play in D&D. So I was
Nice.
like,
Yeah. Hmm.
that works.
I like that fits. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it gets to the idea, and like, and also like sort of rogue being sort of this idea of like going back to like the Robin Hood sort of rogue archetype of somewhat a commoner who is taking on oppressive systems, and like I was like, yeah, I'll hop onto that little like
You're
words
like,
reputation.
how topical right now.
Uh, um So shortly after, let's see, because so college had me going, I'm gonna be an actor, and then also a writer because I started publishing poetry. And anytime I tell the universe I'm not gonna do a thing, they're like, bet. um, so I started realizing that like I had my first couple playwriting debuts in college, and I was like getting paid for publishing my writing and producing
That's
plays.
great.
And so, but I was still like, I'm an actor. And so, fast forward to out of college and past actor teaching in Ohio, and I had a gig that like got postponed because of like nonprofit theater budgets, especially, are
Absolutely.
shaky right now.
Very
um,
shaky right now. Absolutely.
so I had a gig that got postponed indefinitely for budget reasons, and I was like, "Well, crap! I had a job, and now I don't." um, so I was like, "Well, the school year's back in session, so all of my school friends who are still in school are right in town. I have this play that I finished. Hey, friends, do you want to do a thing?" My dad's so like I got some space for free. My dad's church was like, "Yep,
Mhm.
here's a key, keep it clean." Um, and I my friends are like, "Yeah, we'll do it for free," and I went, "No, no." I don't know how much I can pay you because of nowhere near independently wealthy, but like even if it's just I make you food, like you're getting
We'll
something.
figure it out. Exactly.
Yeah. So I put together like I taught myself how to run a crowdfunding campaign, and our first day in the rehearsal space, the church pickleball group was practicing, and so the church lady saw some people they didn't know. They came over, were like, "Hey, can we help you find anything? You know, welcome." We told them what we were doing, and they were like, can we copy your posters? I'll take some to work, and I'll do you have a fundraiser? What's the link? I'm gonna donate right now. Fast forward to like maybe
Beautiful.
2-3 weeks later, we had enough raised, mostly by Midwest Christians, to pay a bunch of mostly queer people $20 an hour, and we didn't charge for tickets.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
And I went, okay, let's see if we can do this again. Got another show that was focused on veterans, did it again. $20 an hour, recorded the cast album, kept the show free. And then was like, okay, the nonprofit part of it is struggling a little bit because I wasn't able to get a ton of grants being under a
Mhm.
religious organization, but it was clearly like something the area needed, and I was getting support from people who couldn't make it to see the shows live, who were like, is there a way that you can record it? Like, we would love to see like a streaming
Yeah.
version of it. So I went, cool, I'm gonna make this my day job. And so, August 1st of 2025, I started Roguish Goblin Stories and building the subscriber base, and working on just getting as much support as I can so that I can pay and also providing professional, like paying theater work in an area that
Absolutely.
doesn't have a lot of paying work. So yeah, that was sort of the the roller coaster.
That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
and it feels like more important than ever to create, I think, alternative systems because, like you said, I think some of the system that we have maybe become used to rely on are not as reliable for whatever reasons, right? And I think that under this regime, we're going to see like more and more cuts to things like the arts because they're not seen as useful in air quote, and I put in air quote because there is so much research evidence of how useful things like arts and humanities and language studies and community spaces are, and all that they bring to communities, not just to individuals. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, that is not the direction that we're in terms of regime level. And so I think it is really important to keep creating kind of alternative structures. And I love that. I know that you said you launched the first investor opportunity because you're really passionate about supporting trans artists, because that's the other thing. I know personally the opportunities for trans folks are shrinking, even as a speaker, educator, trainer. Not as many calls, not as many emails lately, and lately as in since fall 2024
Yeah.
onwards. And so I think it is really important to keep creating kind of our own spaces where somehow we have each other's back, and knowing that there's plenty of community, like your church ladies who are like, let's do this, Bex.
Yes.
We'll get you donation, and we'll, put flyers around, which is beautiful. And so tell me a little bit more about like the big vision. Like if you could like wave a magic wand and tomorrow you have exactly what you wanted, what's the big vision for Roguish Goblin Stories?
Yeah, ambitious, that's for sure.
That's great. I'm all about ambition. Go for it.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's like I have never had wasn't expecting to get $20 an hour for the first one and went, okay, clearly that dream that
Exactly.
felt massive was much more doable than I thought. So yeah, big vision is I want to build productions like entertainment spaces that are also building around like community gardens and affordable housing and supporting indigenous land stewardship, just because that seems like a helpful thing to do, like
Yeah.
um and also like how cool would it be to like go to like the local like outdoor theater space and like your concessions are like in the trees, like there's the apples, there's a washing station, like how fun, like and
It's
also
beautiful.
like
Hmm.
supporting local communities like food sovereignty and like you know uh, as a traveling actor who's also a pastor's kid, boy do I have some wild housing stories. And so like affordable housing that isn't catching fire, isn't full of mold, isn't filling your lungs with carbon monoxide are like
Yes.
like
All things that
housings.
would be nice. Yeah. Maybe even
Yeah,
accessible housing for the people who need it. We're just like, yeah. Hmm.
so that when people come over to visit they don't get stuck in the front door. um yeah, so like the housing and being a United Methodist from the Midwest, food are like
Oh,
very
yes.
important.
Always the food. Yeah. Hmm.
um and also like because the outdoor theater being that y'all come on in space, like it seems unrelated at first to be like theater and housing initiatives and food sovereignty, what, but it's like it's all that same world of that community building and like
Yes.
strengthening, knowing your neighbors, and like theater feeds the soul and the mind so much, it might as well also feed the body.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. And I know in Minneapolis, I'm trying to think of the name of the project. I think it was the Picnic Operetta. I want to say that was like, it's such a beautiful project. And, so you would go and you would get food, but there would be opera and it would be like in gardens or parks. And I'm pretty sure it is. I'll send you the link because I'm
Oh,
like, and I'll
cool.
put it also in the description if people want to check it out. But that creativity, it really is about community building. That's really what we're talking about, right? We're talking about sustainable living for the people who do the labor, right? Like housing that is like respectful of our human dignity. That's the way I think about it, like when
Yeah.
there's like, that meets the needs of the people, enough food, like things that shouldn't really, I feel, be that hard in such a wealthy country overall. And yet we know that they're really hard because of lots of systemic reasons. So I agree that all those things are connected. And I think that's often what people don't realize, that it's arts is not just for like upper middle class people. No, art is really what gives a lot of folks in the community a way to come together, a way to support each other, a way to celebrate, a way to, imagine other possibilities, a way to educate kids, engage elders as well. We have a lot of kind of theater locally now that have moved kind of further north that kind of is in that mixture of amateur and professional theater, I like to call it, where the auditions are in the community, right? But there's also like professionally trained actors, and the productions are beautiful. So I totally see that. How do you see the in person, like the housing, the community, the gardens, with native plants and indigenous land stewardship go together with the online platform? Because it sounds at the moment it's really more of an online platform. So tell me about that connection, because I think sometimes people think in very binary ways, online and in person, but I don't think they need to be so separate. So I'm curious about how you're imagining that piece.
Yeah, and especially starting out, I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from like National Theater, Marquee TV, like the other platforms that like
Yes.
they do what's for non-theater folks what's called a pro shot, which is essentially they
Hmm.
have a anywhere from like 1 to like 4, it depends on the budget. Like they have camera
Yes.
crews either in the audience shooting it with an audience, which is my preferred, or they like shoot a dress rehearsal so that you can stream a recording of the show even if you can't like make it in person. I mean, especially with COVID, a bunch of different tactics for
Absolutely.
how do we digitize, and then also like the theory question of like what is theater and when does it become film and like you know but yeah,
Yeah.
so like recording the shows. I think there's also ways to do like hybrid attendance for sure,
Mm.
especially if the cameras aren't already there. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
also doing regular like I have gotten the privilege to do a lot of different kinds of playwright groups. So I've been in some that like met over Discord. I've been in some that were in person, or some that like, you walked onto a Zoom call and you were like reading the play out loud and then getting feedback. And so like that's a really good way to like bridge that because people get to see online. Okay, you're like I'm calling it a play test.
Yeah.
um, where everyone is aware that like the play is still in development, like this might be the first, second, whatever draft.
Hmm.
And so the point is you're hearing it out loud, it is in service for the playwright, and then the audience gets to work with the talk with the actors and the playwright afterwards and provide feedback and like their reactions. So like that's a really fun, because then you get people involved and they get to see how the play grows, and then when it finally does get staged they're like, oh, remember when like
That is so cool. I love that. That's a great idea. Also, it's, yeah, that it sounds like there are so many different ways that people can engage, and so many different audiences that this would be accessible to. And you also have a podcast as part of Roguish Goblin Stories. Is that right? I see that you
yeah.
have a podcast, Our Lives Aren't That Interesting. Is that what it's called? Or
Yeah.
tell me more about that. I love hearing about other people podcasts. So I'm like, yes, tell me more.
Yeah, so as I am still like very early, very low budget, like I'm still like trying to apply for grants and like grow the subscriber base and the investors, to be able to pay actors for those like fully staged productions. Um, everywhere I go, at least one person is like, I need a dang memoir of like your life and also like what in the heck, because like as a clergy household we have some very interesting stories and some of them we can't share, but some of them have been already like part of sermon illustrations for years, like the time that I cut my own hair with a pair of safety scissors, like
I understand, especially my daughter has been with me her whole life in terms of parenting. Is part of many stories I share when training and when writing books with our consent. But, we often
yeah.
joke about it. It's like pieces of our lives are pretty public. I understand that.
Right. Yeah. And so my parents and I were talking, and because my parents are, I love them to death, and they are doing everything. They're like, what can we do to help you like get this to the point where it can be your
Yeah,
day job? And so I was like, you two keep talking about how like, oh, our lives are. We were told all growing up that like our lives aren't that interesting. We don't have anything that important to say. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, do you realize how wild some of the things that we have been through are, and how encouraging that having being able to see Christian parents and their trans aro a's kid, like that alone is so encouraging to so many people that I talk to. And so they were like,
absolutely.
well, let's do a podcast. And so like we started a podcast about it. Yeah.
I love that. What's the focus of the podcast? That you just talk about your lives, like basically,
Yeah.
or
It is all
oh,
sharing like stories from our life, and we are trying to be very intentional about like
of
what
course.
stories that we tell and put out on the internet. Um
Hmm.
but the underlying focus and the underlying message is the same underlying message that's for Roguish Goblin Stories, which is you're loved, you're not alone. And
I
so
love that.
bringing all of those stories of like the dog being scared of the toaster, and what do you do when you're stuck in a space where you're very clearly not welcomed and you can't leave right away. Like that's one of the early episodes.
Hmm.
And how do you hold on to, how do you continue to choose joy when everything is just falling apart, and just bringing all of those stories back to that you're loved, you're not alone, you're loved, you're not alone, you're loved, you're not
I love that so much. I think that now more than ever, we really need to remember that those moments of joy, those moments of connection, we need those. Like that is what nourishes us to keep going, no matter what
Yes.
else is going on. And I think it can be hard for people to remember that, especially if they're isolated or if they haven't experienced this kind of connection and community. So, what a beautiful gift for your family to kind of give this to the world. That's fantastic. And actually fits well with one I always ask all my guests at the moment, especially my trans non-binary gender expansive guests, which is mostly what I've shifted to focus on since fall of 2024. What is it that's kind of giving you nourishment or joy or comfort as we keep facing a lot of anti-trans sentiment from certain parts of the world?
Yeah, I think um I definitely draw I have gotten much more intentional about like making sure that my morning routine is I get up, I work out, and then I meditate. I have some like meditations that I have found sort of like sorting through all of the and
Mm-hmm.
have saved to my phone. Um I have that habit stacked onto that tapping, which I like just came
Mm-hmm.
across like recently. And as a pressure point martial artist, I'm like, how have I missed this for so long? Because like I know what all of these pressure points are. So like having that like as blocked off as I possibly can every morning, that I'm like, and I'm not necessarily lifting weights 7 days a week, but at least 4 days a week. And then, I'm trading it out with like yoga and some other things for variety. But having that set time in the morning has done wonders the last couple weeks. Journaling has
Mm-hmm.
really helped. Um, Also, like, even if I can't, because there's 8 inches of snow on the ground, even if I
I know
can't
that
go
feeling.
drive, you know, at least, I have set up with a few friends that like we have a recurring like call in our calendars that like every month or every 2 weeks or every week we're getting on a video call and we're checking in on each other. It doesn't replace the in-person connection,
Mhm.
but it's definitely better than nothing. Especially in the
No,
winter.
I absolutely I love that. Yeah, in winter, in where it's cold, like where you are and where I am, is definitely a thing. But I love that you mentioned so many things that are so important and yet it's so easy to not prioritize, right? Movement and connecting with ourselves, whatever that looks like, whether it's meditation, whether it's like just having breakfast or sitting quietly or reading, right? Or connecting with people. Those are all things that we really need. And I think that often under late stage capitalism, it's so easy to not prioritize that,
Yeah.
especially during moments of stress. So I'm really glad to hear that you're prioritizing those things and they're bringing you nourishment.
I also like scrapped pretty much all the social media off my phone. Like I still have access to it on my computer because that's how I do a lot of my marketing. But like I
Exactly.
treat it purely as a marketing tool basically at this point, and that has helped a lot as well. And like I am, now that I've gotten some of those self care habits a little more ingrained, the next one that I'm adding is, because I can get very excited about like, I'm going to be writing and like doing all of the things for my business, and then like not take a break. So, like, the next habit, oh yeah. Especially when it's like something that I'm like, A, excited about, and B, also like growing into my day job.
Hmm.
Being like, I would like, to have the income to support. um, but the next habit that I'm working in is having at least 1 or 2 days of just no devices, because those are the
Amazing.
days when I do, at the very least, when I cut things off at 5 and like, nope, I am focusing on real life, real people. I think of like the movie Ready Player One, where
Yes.
they shut the Oasis off, they shut the alternative reality, the video game, off for 2 days of the week, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's probably a good idea.
We've definitely had some like no devices day in our family sometimes because I'm like, okay, no devices day or no devices night. Let's just all like sit around and talk or read. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so important because it can be so easy to just disappear into our electronics nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so real. I love all of this. I feel like I could keep talking and talking, but I want to be respectful of your time. If listeners want to support your project or want to kind of see some of the plays that you've talked about, where should they go?
Yeah, so I'll spell it out because sometimes auto transcribe does not spell my name correctly.
Oh, and they're all going to be in the episode description too, but just in case people are like, I'm listening, I'm going to look it up on Instagram right now. I always like to ask as well.
Yeah, so you can find Roguish Goblin Stories at beksroen.org/RGS, which is BEKSROEN.org/RGS. That page is going to have a couple different options for you to be involved. If you have extra resources and you really want to help, like, not just like, oh, I'm bankrolling the productions and like helping get this off the ground, but like, you're getting to put names and faces to the people in the queer community and the artistic community that you're helping. I've intentionally designed the investors to be, there are different levels of engagement based on what you prefer, but getting that personal connection with the artists, like Q&As with the artists, getting like pre-show dinners for when we do in-person shows, getting to, even if you have someone you're sort of kind of fond of and you want to name a character in the play after somebody, there's that, and that's that really, really deep impact where you're getting to put those names and faces to the people that you're helping. On that
Beautiful.
same page is also, if you're just like, I just want to see the shows and a little behind the scenes and I just need, a community built by us and for us, there's just an option to subscribe, and there's 2 different tiers based on basically how much behind the scenes do you want.
Yeah, that's fair. That sounds so fun. I hope that a lot of listeners check it out because it sounds super fun. And anything that we haven't talked about that you were hoping that we would cover, or anything else that you would like the listeners or people watching, if they're watching this on YouTube, to know?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking around and for not giving up and for not letting all of the chaos numb you. It is difficult, but one of the things that I'm trying to do with the stories is because theater is an excellent rehearsal for life. And
That is so very true.
using the stories to help us rehearse how to grieve and how to have joy, and how those two grow together, right? Like, happiness is that fleeting situational, like, it comes, it goes, it's much harder to hold on to. But
Absolutely.
real joy comes with and from and around the grief. And so being able to let that flow through is like really what I'm hoping people get from anything I say, and any show that I do. And also, it's really fun to make trans people and air and ace people the main characters and give them a sword.
That is true. Oh, I love that so much. Well, I can't wait to see how Roguish Goblin Stories grows, and I can't wait to see for that beautiful vision that you talked about of like housing and land and food sovereignty and indigenous land stewardship and community and theater all kind of grow. I can't wait to like read news that it's all happening and it's thriving, and it's like a model for so many other communities maybe to follow. So thank you, Bex. Thank you so much for your time today. And the Dear Gender Stories listeners, I hope that you feel nourished, excited, and inspired to explore the edges of your own imagination, no matter what you do. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Mhm.